So I thought, what are my chances now to go to university to try and do a science degree? But I ended up swapping onto a BTEC in applied sciences, which at the time I wasn't too thrilled about because BTECs get a bad rap. It's kind of used as like a derogatory word sometimes. But I'm actually really grateful for that BTEC I did. And I think dropping out of chemistry was probably the right choice because in the end, I got the highest grade I could in that BTEC. And it feels like it was actually quite valuable in the end when I was applying for apprenticeships. So I came out of sixth form with a C in biology, which I was really disappointed with because that was always my favorite subject. I thought if I'm going to do well in something, it's got to be biology. But I didn't really do that well. So I was really worried about everybody applying to university at the time. And I was thinking, I don't have much of a choice here. Like, I'm not going to be able to do what I've always wanted to do.
Hi everyone, we are back with the Blooming Late Scientist podcast, and you know, every week I'm like, oh, I'm so excited about this week's guest and this is really exciting, but this week's a little bit of an unusual one for me because I have someone great on here, Ted Mason, but also I know Ted's mum, so you know, even slightly different this week. Ted works for Catapult, and I'm sure you all know Catapult, cell and gene therapy. That's all I need to say. But I'm not going to say any more, Ted. I'm going to hand over to you. If you can just introduce yourself and tell us about what it is you do.
Yep. So I'm Ted, and I'm an apprentice at Catapult. I've been going now for 3.5 years in my apprenticeship, and I think it's been a really good experience because I'm in the lab every day almost. So I feel like I'm the same as everybody else. I'm a lab worker, and I get chances to do kind of desk work as well. And I've got a couple more years left in my apprenticeship, and by then I'll have a bachelor's degree. So it feels like a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty good deal when you consider the debt that people come out of uni with, right? And
Yep.
no experience in the lab.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't really know what the university approach is like, but everyone I work with is a little bit jealous, I think, knowing that when I'm done, I'm going to have like 5 whole years of lab experience. You compare that to people who have been to university, I don't know, they're probably not quite on that same level. So I think I'm going to be set when I'm done, hopefully.
I mean, I would be incredibly surprised if you weren't inundated with offers after that, because one of the weaknesses I would say is definitely that a lot of undergrads don't have the practical experience. And of course, the lab experience that you're gaining is so specialized as well in terms of what you're doing and a growing area. So, I mean, I know you can't talk about actually what you're doing because probably IP issues and stuff, but what kind of skills have you gained in the lab during your time doing this?
Yeah, I've spent the last 3.5 years kind of like on a quest to build out my CV to make it as long as possible, so that when I apply somewhere else, there's so many things that can be useful to them. So like day to day, I've been doing various ways of qPCR, flow cytometry, cell culture work I've been trained on recently. So a lot of iPSCs I've been culturing. Those are stem cells. So I feel like there's just such a long list of skills that I've learned, and I'm really grateful for like the people that have been able to train me on everything as well.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the thing we like just said about the undergrad experience, that's also the other difference, right? Because in an undergrad, you might do a microbiology practical where you're staining bacteria, looking at it under the microscope. You might do, if you're lucky, you might do a Western blot. But you know, like stem cells, forget it. You're not touching those things, right? In fact, I mean, I didn't do any cell culture at all during my undergrad.
Yeah.
Unless like someone has it in their dissertation, it generally doesn't happen. So that's such a lot of great experience for you to get.
Yeah,
But
I do feel the pressure a little bit with the stem cells in particular, because I can see why maybe you wouldn't give it to people who don't have loads of experience, because when I'm doing stem cell work, um, the importance of trying to keep those cells alive over the course of a month or so, there is quite a bit of pressure there, because so many of the team are relying on what I'm doing in the lab to kind of use in their future experiments, that sometimes it does get to me and I get slightly worried about contaminations or making mistakes. But I'm glad that I've been given the responsibility and that the people here trust me enough with kind of important experiments like that.
I mean, a lot of people think cell culture is like an easy process, but there's so much you have to think about, right? I mean, the contamination is such a big issue, is huge, and it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you the number of times I contaminated my cells in some way or another. Um, but yeah, so I can imagine that you feel the pressure, especially when, you know, it's different because you're actually inside a company that is commercial, whereas I was in academia, right? What was going to happen if I contaminated my cells? I just start all over again and
Yeah.
it's fine. Um, but let's go back to your kind of educational history. Can you tell us a bit about your route, like from school into this?
Yeah. I don't know. My route, I suppose, isn't conventional because growing up, I always loved science. And I knew throughout primary school, secondary school, that this is what I wanted to do. So I guess I'm not a blooming late scientist in that I knew I always wanted to do this, maybe. Um, and this has been my course for my whole life. But the difference was that secondary school, my GCSEs were great, and science was great there. I found it quite challenging, but just enough. But then I got to sixth form, and that's where it started to fall apart for me, because I'd signed myself up for biology, history, and chemistry A levels, but I think I just wasn't ready for the step up and difficulty there, maybe, and just the rest of my life being kind of a moody teenager at the time, I was losing motivation, I think, with like academics at that point. And turns out A levels, that's not a good point to lose motivation. I didn't really realize that at the time, but I was struggling so much with the science options. So in the end, I had to drop out of chemistry, which I knew was going to be a big deal, because when I was looking at applying to university, so many of them required two A levels in two sciences. So I thought, what are my chances now to go to university to try and do a science degree? But I ended up swapping onto a BTEC in applied sciences, which at the time I wasn't too thrilled about, because BTECs get a bad rap. Um, it's kind of used as like a derogatory word sometimes. But I'm actually really grateful for that BTEC I did. And I think dropping out of chemistry was probably the right choice, because in the end, I got the highest grade I could in that BTEC. And it feels like it was actually quite valuable in the end when I was applying for apprenticeships. So I came out of sixth form with a C in biology, which I was really disappointed with, because that was always my favorite subject. I thought, if I'm going to do well in something, it's got to be biology. But I didn't really do that well. So I was really worried about everybody applying to university at the time. And I was thinking, I don't have much of a choice here. Like, I'm not going to be able to do what I've always wanted to do. Um, so that left me in a bit of an awkward spot. And I don't exactly remember how, but I was led to apprenticeships. It was kind of funny because in sixth form, everyone was given kind of hours, dedicated time to look for universities to apply to. Everything is geared up around that, and 90% of people were preparing all of their applications, their UCAS guidelines, that kind of thing. And I was feeling a bit lost because everybody knew what they wanted to do, really, or that's what it felt like. And I think I ended up just scrolling through the Gov UK website for any apprenticeship that sounded like it might suit me. And I applied for a lot. Some of them weren't science related. It was like an animal husbandry one. I would have quite liked to have done that. I could be doing that right now, but I didn't pursue that one. And I took up one, there was one for MI6 as well that I applied for. And I actually got to the interview for that as well. Not science related, but I just wanted to give it a go. And I'm glad I did that interview. It was a fun interview. But in the end, I found this role, and I was destined to be hired by Autolus. So I would have been working in Stevenage originally. You know Autolus?
Yes, yeah. I do, yes.
So I was going to be working with them in Stevenage, and this was end of 2019, I think. So I was really hopeful at that point because I thought I'm finally going to be able to work in a lab, even though I didn't do as well as I wanted to in school. And I was ready to be hired. I'd done my interviews, and it must have been March 2020, just about a month away from being hired at Autolus. I was told the position's no longer available, and that really felt bad at the time. I think they had a round of layoffs combined with COVID, which hit just around then. It was a bad time because I had kind of found this scrap of hope for the science industry. But I did get really lucky because this kind of network of people related to apprentices in the science industry, they were able to hook me up with Catapult. And Catapult they took me on without kind of the usual screening and interview procedures. They kind of fast tracked me on, which I'm still super grateful for. But that's kind of my story of how I got here.
Do you know what? There's so many things you said there that are just people will relate to so much. And the first one is this idea that when you're at school, everybody is made to feel like university is really the only next step. And it's something that, I mean, I feel quite strongly about that is absolute nonsense. I apologise, schools, but there needs to be like more about alternative options. And those students that want alternative options should not be made to feel like it's because they're less capable.
Yeah.
Because that's often not the case. I just think that, you know, there's so many reasons why somebody would choose an alternative route. One is the money, right? The debt.
Yeah.
Two is the practical experience. But also sometimes those environments are not really conducive to your best learning, like the academic environment.
Yeah, I knew for me that university wouldn't have been the right choice, and that I was really sick of kind of school academics. I just didn't want any more homework, no more being lectured to by people, no more having to go to this certain room and learn with everybody at the same time. I was kind of sick of all of that. So I knew no matter what at that point that, okay, I'm probably not going to go to university. And that's been reinforced a little bit over the years because doing this apprenticeship for about once a week a year, I have to go down to University of Kent, who my degree is in partnership with. And while I'm down there, it's a bit of a shock to me because sitting in lectures, I think I definitely would have struggled if I had gone to university. Just a week is enough for me to realize, okay, I think I'm on the right track doing what I'm doing now. And seeing their labs as well, a university lab compared to the labs I work in now, it's a bit of a stark difference when I'm so used to everything being well maintained, brand new, not necessarily tidy, but having the latest.
No, we know
equipment.
You mean tidy, Ted. We've worked in academic labs. We've worked in academic labs. They're a mess.
Yeah. So going to University of Kent, as much as they're a great place for me to study, makes me feel like I made the right choice. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, the other thing is often people think like you have to understand the theory first and then you do the practical stuff. But one of the experiences I had was that actually I did really good at theory, and then when it came to putting that to practical use in the lab, I just automatically assumed that meant I'd be good. And
Hmm.
of course, that's not the case. And I think in a way, this kind of like flipped approach must be quite useful because when you go to the lectures, you actually have a real understanding
Yeah,
already.
yeah, for sure. It definitely works both ways, I think. It just depends on who you are and how you learn. But for me, there are times, especially when I started coming straight out of school, really, where I hadn't held a pipette before, and then I was being thrown into the labs to do qPCR for a whole day. Um, I didn't really understand what I was doing for a little while, because you can kind of follow a protocol like a cooking recipe, and you're just doing everything with your hands. You're not really understanding what's going on behind the scenes. But I think combining that with the theory afterwards or throughout is really good for me. Um, and it means I learn everything like really thoroughly and at the same time, rather than having to kind of split it in half and learn the practical here, learn the theory here. It's all in one for me. And while I'm doing it, I'm working with people who have done it for years, and do it every day. They're experts. They get paid to do it. So I don't know. It feels like the best way to learn for me, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I guess one of the things I want to ask is because I'm assuming like when you come from like your BTEC and you're thrown into this environment, I mean, it's quite a brave step as well because it's pretty scary, right? It must have been. So, how has it worked in terms of who's mentoring you and what that looks like?
Yeah. I mean, it was even scary being thrown into an office because coming from school and then you're sitting in like the classic office setting with a lab next door, it's a weird experience. Having to learn all of the email systems and the paperwork and kind of how you behave in an office. But I've been super lucky, I think, throughout my journey to have like there's always people around me. Obviously, everyone I work with is super helpful, but there's always kind of a few people that I'm really close to. And these are people that have been doing this for ages and they really care about my future, it feels like. So at Catapult, we kind of have a mentor program, of mentors that are assigned to you. But obviously, that doesn't stop you from branching out and talking to other people. So my line managers have always been super helpful, looking out for me, and even the kind of apprenticeship community. There's a lot of kind of mentor behavior that goes on there. People helping each other, and then in the years later, kind of passing that knowledge back down. So although it's kind of an unconventional route, weirdly, it feels like people are ready for it, and that there are systems in place to kind of help you through it. Because it would be really tricky if I'm just trying to figure out everything for myself, um, jumping straight into like such a deep and wide industry. But the people I've had the chance to talk to through the years has been great. Like every conversation I come away with them, thinking like that's kind of inspiring. Like maybe I should think about my next steps a little bit more deeply when they have so much advice to offer me. So it's been really good.
It sounds like because I guess one of the things people worry about so much in any part of like work, no matter their age or how they've got into that, is this kind of fear of making a mistake. And it sounds like having that support around you allows you to make a mistake and go, "Oops, I made a mistake," rather than trying to cover it up and
Hmm.
start all over again. Is
Yeah,
that something you feel?
definitely. Because going in, you are really scared about making mistakes because you realize, okay, I'm working for a real company, and this company needs to make money, things need to hit the deadlines. It's not like school where it doesn't really matter too much. And for a while, I think I was afraid of telling people when I'd done something wrong. But now that's gone out the window. And I'm happy to own up to something I've done, because I think everybody realizes like the position I'm in, and everybody's like super sympathetic for the apprentices. And I'm sure they look back on at what point they would have been kind of at my age, if they were thrown into the labs. And everyone realizes like everyone's just doing their best here, and there's always a fix for the mistakes. It's never gotten too badly. So yeah, it's been a great place to work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's great that they had this system in place because you hear of so many companies. I mean, I can't speak for the science industry in terms of apprenticeships because actually, until you got this one, I didn't even know it was a thing. But in other industries, you often hear of apprentices just being taken on to be like a bit of cheap labour and not getting any
Yep.
support. But it sounds like you've got a real defined path for development and you can choose what way that goes. So, in terms of that, what does that look like for you in terms of where you go next?
Yeah. So from the kind of baseline structural kind of view, it's split into two paths for my apprenticeship. So I have an initial 3 years, and at the end of those 3 years, I get a foundation degree, which is what I've just got earlier in this year. So I've got my foundation degree, and then after that, we're given a choice. We can kind of either stop it there, work for the company, go off, do our own thing, or stay on for another 18 months, and that will get you the bachelor's degree in the end. So that's what I've chosen to do. I'm staying on because I think the bachelor's degree is going to be worth my time. But from there, I'm not sure. I need to figure it out, really. It feels like there's so many options open to me. And there's even higher apprenticeship levels you can go to. I've done the level 5, I'm starting the level 6, but there's people doing level 7 apprenticeships as well. But for me, I think I'm going to get my bachelor's degree and hang around Catapult for a little bit longer before I kind of figure out what my specialization is. Because working in this field, you kind of see everyone's kind of got their own little niche, and I kind of want to find mine. So that's my mission for the next couple of years, to kind of find what I want to do.
I love that. And I mean, I think it says a lot about the fact that you want to stay. It says a lot about them and, you know, how they've supported you along the way. So I mean, there'll be lots of people listening to this that might be, you know, at the stage where they're thinking about what do I do next in terms of A levels or BTEC or whatever. But also there'll be, you know, parents listening that might be able to advise or help their children in some way. So you mentioned the gov.uk website, but so apart from that, are there any other websites you know of where people can look for apprenticeships like this?
Yeah, I think I get asked this quite a lot by people. How do you find the apprenticeships? And to be honest, I can't remember that well because it was so long ago, and it must have changed so much since then. I'm hoping it's changed for the better, because it really wasn't. It was just chance, really, finding this 4 years ago. But I've been working, and other apprentices at my company have been working to kind of spread the word. So we're going to trade fairs, we're going to schools, we're doing as much in-person kind of outreach as we can, to help people learn about apprenticeships. So you might see apprentices at kind of what would normally be a university fair kind of place, and we're trying to tell you about all the benefits of an apprenticeship. But I would say kind of keep your options open when you're looking for apprenticeships, because obviously they're finite compared to university places. There's so many universities you can work for, you can study with, and they're going to have a lot of places in their classes. But apprenticeships are a little bit less so, because not every company hires apprentices, and when they do, it might only be one or two at a time. So kind of, I would say, keep your options open when you're looking for apprenticeships, because you could end up doing something that isn't exactly what you had in mind, but paths will open up, I'm sure, like they did for me. And even if you don't, it's not like you're stuck in an apprenticeship either. It's not like a fixed contract. You can get out. I've seen people do it, and they have great reasons to, and they've decided it's not for them. So you don't have to commit either way. You can try an apprenticeship and then go on to university afterwards, or stop halfway through. There's still options. There's still choices there.
That's such a great mindset to have, because I think especially at that age, you know, where you would have been, what, 17, 18?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Often people are so kind of tunnel vision because schools have almost made them that way. So they're like, I need to do this. This is what I have to do next. And this is the job I need to get, or this is the university degree I need to do. So to have that attitude that's like, well, you need to be a bit more open-minded and just kind of see what comes along. I think that's such a great way to do things generally.
Yeah.
Because we get so fixated on things in life, and then you're so disappointed when that tiny one thing in your tunnel vision doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think personally, I'm really sort of jealous of you in a way, because I know how you've switched in between so many different job types, and you haven't really let yourself be pinned down. So I'm gonna take that and maybe use it in my future, and think about, maybe I don't have to be in the lab forever. Maybe there's other options. So I think you've influenced me a little bit there for sure as well.
Oh, thanks, Ted. That's really nice. Yes, I am quite difficult to pin down. It's true. But I think with the experience you're getting, although it might feel like you're in the lab and that's the experience, actually, there's so much that you've developed during the time that you may not even know
Yeah,
yet. I mean, from a, you know, because you're in a commercial business, I imagine that there's more of an understanding of those kinds of processes than if you were in a university lab, and that will get you very far once you finish.
that's
I can
true.
assure you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
recently I've been working a little bit more with external collaborators at Catapult, which is a little bit daunting at first, because you realize um, how much what we do matters, I think, and how the deadlines and the money really count. But once you get past that, you realize this is going to be a really useful skill in the future. So I'm glad to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, as we said earlier, it's such a massive area. And Catapult themselves, I mean, if I remember rightly, from when you started to now, they have grown massively.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've seen lots of people come and go, but the place is like teeming now with people. So it's been really good to watch it grow, I think, and being able to meet all these new people as well. Because now I'm kind of becoming one of the veterans of Catapult. So I'm passing on my knowledge to them. It does feel a little bit strange sometimes, especially when I first started. I get a little bit of an imposter syndrome, because you know, everyone around you has a PhD, and you just came straight out of school, and you feel maybe a little bit like you don't belong. And there were times, even when I was in the lab training someone um, who's like a fully fledged scientist, has a PhD, and it's like, I don't have any qualifications. What am I doing here? But I think over time I've realized that's not really what counts. It doesn't really matter too much, the titles next to your name. It's like, as long as you love the science and you know what you're doing, just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I forget I've even got that title half the time.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. And the other thing I'll tell you that you may have learnt by now is that PhDs have like the highest level of imposter syndrome. They totally know. On the surface it often feels like they know what they're talking about, but they're like, the duck analogy or the swan, like floating along nicely, and underneath the legs are like, oh, I don't know anything,
Yeah.
someone's going to catch me out. So I think it's good for you to kind of see that they all feel that way. But in terms of you like transferring the knowledge, you say like you're a veteran, that part of it must be quite helpful, because let's set aside the technical stuff. The fact that someone's going to come in and feel like that, and you're going to go, yeah, I definitely felt like that.
Hmm.
I felt like I didn't know anything. That's going to mean so much to someone.
Yeah. It's been great as well seeing new apprentices join the company, because I can directly relate to them, and seeing like them improving their confidence over the years has just been awesome as well. And seeing them go from where I was, to like working on bioreactors all day, independently, is kind of crazy. And I guess people probably look at me the same way now, people that have been here for the same amount of time. So I'm super glad I went this route, really, because I don't know if university would have been the right choice for me.
So no regrets then.
Not at all, no.
Okay. So my last question is, if you had one piece of advice to give to people that might be doing the same, what would you say?
I would say embrace kind of being a bit weird. Maybe embrace your weird side, because it will lead you places that are probably more interesting than the well-trodden path. So there's kind of things that pop up that I wouldn't normally do, because I would say, oh, maybe I'm not the right fit for this. But I just say yes to it anyway, and take my own kind of take my own weird energy to it. And it's worked out well, I think. So many opportunities where I kind of thought, I'm the odd one out. I should leave this to somebody who knows a little bit more about it. So like become become a nerd in that specialist subject that no one else really cares about. Just go all the way in, and see where it takes you. Um, and I'll see in a few years' time if that's good advice, I think, because I'm not too sure yet. But I've had some really good opportunities that I'm so glad to have had. So it's worked out.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Um, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think we're going to put out this podcast, and you're going to be inundated with people wanting you to work for them. In the biotech industry, I would not be surprised if that happens. Um, but I mean, I could talk to you all day. Like, I feel like I could just ask you so much stuff, but people have a finite attention span. So I'm going to finish it here, but I really want to thank you for agreeing to come on here. What you've said is going to be so valuable to so many people, and it's such a unique perspective, and it's only you we're going to hear from with this perspective. So thank you for being here.
That's all right. I'm glad to have helped. Hopefully, it can reach a few parents, a few people looking into apprenticeships, because I'm happy to sell them. My experience has been great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And to everyone else listening, we will see you next time. Thank you.